And welcome to another episode of New Battlefield, CyberPapa's New Battlefield. My name is Eric Belardo, and I am known as the CyberPapa. And I want to welcome you guys to a very, very important episode here in New Battlefields. Today we're going to talk about domestic violence, and we're joined by Chris Cox, the Executive Director, Managing Director of Operation SafeEscape. So I'm hoping that you guys will stick with us here and all your questions are going to be answered. So as usual, we have with me my partner in crime, the Cyber Warrior. Cyber Warrior, how are you doing?
Look, and before we get started on this very, very serious topic, because as we all know, it is extremely serious and something that we have to deal with, I got to tell you, I'm doing great. I really am. I'm doing great. We started back up, last week or the week before? And it's good to be back weekly with you on New Battlefields. And, as far as me and you working together, I can't be happier with what we have going on, especially tonight and the topics that we have coming up. So, yeah, other than that, look, let's get to it. Let's get started and let's have a good evening of talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and I want to welcome some of the folks that are joining us today. Mommy Guide Lala, she's joining us from the Philippines. We've got Elle, we've got John, and we've got Sarah. Thank you very much for joining. Please let other people know about this show because this show is very important and something that's near and dear to my heart. So without further ado, let's make some noise for Mr. Chris Cox.
Hi, Eric. Hi, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be here. Good to meet the Cyber Warrior, too.
Oh, yes. We'll talk about that later. All right. So with that, this is a very important topic, very important to us here, and I'm glad that you were able to join us on short notice here. You're always going to be my gold medal, so remember that. Okay?
Thank you.
So, number one, can you tell our audience a little bit about your journey in cybersecurity? Because it's funny because when we started talking, Chris and I served in the same area there at the National Training Center.
I'm sorry.
And yes. Yep. And we bonded over that. So, Chris, tell us your story and how you got into cybersecurity and your whole story till now.
Well, the only good thing about living at the National Training Center, which for those of you that don't know, it's in the middle of the Mojave Desert. If you take a map of nowhere, it's smack dab in the middle of it, right there. The only good thing about living there is you don't ever have to get sent there. So at least you get to go to bed in your own bed most of the nights. You're not sleeping in the cots like for a couple months on end or for a couple weeks on end like some of the people there. So, so actually cybersecurity was my second career choice. My first choice I was going to be a rock and roll god, and I'm a little bit behind on that one. Yeah. That was back when I had hair, actually, like way long, so I could have pulled it off. But I think when I cut it, I made a different career decision at that point. So I think like a lot of us in the field, it started off with IT. You know, it's computers just started making sense and tinkering around with gadgets and taking stuff apart. I was very fortunate that I had that my parents were very tolerant of me taking apart their electronics and mostly putting it back together. So it became something that I enjoyed doing. And when I ended up years later, I ended up joining the Army, ended up there with Fort Irwin National Training Center. And the way it happened to work is that I knew a little bit about computers, and they happened to say the unit I was reporting to said the next person that walks in that door to report that knows anything about computers, they're our new computer guy. So that kind of brought me into that field. So I started doing IT, which I think was a great background, and then gradually moved into more of the, at the time, the InfoSec, and then information assurance, and then cybersecurity, and then cybersecurity for a while, and back to cybersecurity. So that was kind of my journey in that.
Wow. And how long have you been doing it now?
Oh, around 13, 14 years, something like that. So in the various iterations, at least in a professional capacity versus breaking my parents' stuff.
Yeah. So that's how we all started, breaking things. That's the whole hacking mentality that, hacking is not a crime. It's just a mindset of trying to find things and trying to get, to understand things. So we all started that way.
So I'm kind of curious though, like to this day, are you in the same boat where when you're like putting back together a computer or working on something that you like are missing screws or have miscellaneous screws that maybe you forgot to put back on the inside? Because it happens to me.
Yeah, I just take out the extra screws because they always include extra screws for some reason.
Okay.
So 4 or 5 more. So I figure they don't need to go back in.
I'm like, if it all stays together, it's fine. You know what? We're okay.
So Chris, tell us. So at some point in time, you decided to build this foundation. So tell us how Operation SafeEscape came to be.
Really, in a roundabout way, it came about because of my own limitations. Because with what I'd realized, when you're, one thing that's kind of common throughout this organization with the individuals that become a part of it is that once you realize that you're in a position to help other people that can't help themselves in the same way, and you realize that you can make a difference in that way, in my mind, it really kind of becomes a moral prerogative to do what you can. That there's individuals that were in my life at that time, so going back to about 2014, 2013, when the genesis of this came up, that I'm honored, trusted me to tell me their story and to say that they were in a position and they needed help. And of course, I did as much as I could. And so, like many people around, that was me doing what I could to help as many people as possible. And then I realized that I have too many limitations. There's so much that I don't know. So when someone came to me and when they needed help with their OPSEC stuff or with their with computers and phones and things like that, that was something that made sense to me. But we started talking more about physical security. We started talking about other aspects of the whole security landscape that I didn't feel that I was, knowledgeable enough in. That's when I realized I had to reach out to other people. When I started reaching out to other people and talking to people that I was fortunate enough to know that were experts in different fields, in forensics and OSINT and all these other things that I needed to become more aware of or more knowledgeable in. And I told them the same thing. I said that, I need help. These people need help. Can you help with what you know? And just the number of people that got excited to do that, the number of people that said, that it didn't occur to them there's a way to use what they knew, what they learned, what they do at work for a much greater good for people that couldn't do it themselves. So it really became a matter of a passion project, if you will.
Okay. And so tell our audience, what is Operation SafeEscape?
That would have been a good place for me to start, actually. Good. I'm glad you brought that up.
No, but this is good translation.
Oh, yeah, it is. So Operation SafeEscape, so we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that focuses primarily on helping survivors of domestic violence, stalking, and harassment to escape their abuse and to stay safe after they do. And that means we kind of focus on 3 different tiers in doing this. Number 1, we focus on the individuals and their support system, so their family, friends, things like that, for the people that need to get out of that dangerous situation. So oftentimes it starts off with something very simple like giving them a phone. Giving them a phone that they can use, that they can secure, they can hide, and they can start to use. Because one of the first aspects of an abusive relationship is isolation, where the abuser will do what they can to isolate the person from their support system, from their friends and family. They'll take away the phone, they'll shut off the phone during the day, whatever it takes, whatever they feel they can do to isolate that person. So that person can finally start talking to their family and friends again, and you break through that isolation, it gives them hope. So we work with them throughout the entirety of the experience. We work with them to break through that isolation, to plan their escape, to effect their escape, and to disappear once they do. Then we make the assumption, we figure they have to go have a safe place to go. So we work with the allies in the field. So the shelters, the safe houses that will take them in, help them to keep themselves and their residents safe. We work with the legal advocates, social workers, things like that, in order to equip them to stay safe and to help their clients. And then the third piece is the advocacy piece. We work with public safety legislators. We advocate for legal change. We advocate for things that will improve the security for a large portion of the population. A big part of that is talking to the security community, talking to your audience and to programmers and developers and saying, well, have you thought about this segment of the population that maybe their mother's maiden name isn't a secure way that they can use to reset their password? There has to be something else. So it's speaking both tech, security, and advocacy and balancing the two.
Okay. Have you noticed a uptick of, as Sarah mentioned here, this has gotten horrible during the pandemic. Have you guys noticed a uptick as well during this period of isolation where we're forced to isolate, but then you've got the people that are doing this isolating other people more?
Yeah, definitely. It has gotten a lot worse. It has gotten really bad because you take an already dangerous situation where at times the survivor being at work is the respite that they get. They're able to get out there and to have some time away and use that time to talk to their support system and have a safe place to communicate and have a safe place to go. And so then you take away that opportunity with these by closing down the workplaces, and that proximity starts to become a lot more volatile. And combined with that, you increase the stress because there's financial stresses. If work gets shut down, people are trapped in the house together, stuck in the house together. So it starts to increase that anxiety, increase that stress. So very certainly, it's not only increased the number of incidents that we've been able to assist with or in a position to assist with, but also really the severity. It's made it a little bit harder for the person to reach out in some cases when the abuser's right there.
So when a person finds themselves in this position, one of the first things that happens is the denial factor. I'm not abused. It's not that bad. I can deal with this. When do you see the abused start reaching out?
So unfortunately, often it's when something happens, when there's that moment that they say, oh, this is bad enough. Abuse takes a lot of forms. And sometimes, like you had said, you're right. Sometimes it's hard for someone to identify that it is abuse. We start talking about gaslighting. We start talking about other forms of mental manipulation and emotional abuse, financial control, all of these other things, particularly when the abuser justifies it over and over again. Yeah. So they may say, well, I'm keeping you away from those bad influences in your life. You can't see your friends because they're not good for you. And so you hear that enough, and it's coupled with other forms of manipulation. And sometimes it starts to sound true when you're hearing that all the time. But oftentimes it's a matter of when it finally crosses that line, there's something violent, something physical, where the person can say, oh, I'm aware of this is abuse. And I think that that's something that requires a lot more. We really need to do a better job of educating people on what abuse looks like. Really starting at the same part where we start talking to our kids and we start talking to students in the schools and say, no one has a right to hit you. We also have to be having the conversation. No one has a right to do these other things that are not healthy.
Yeah, that manipulation factor.
Yeah, oh, yeah. And I think a big part of that is, and it's more so the physical abuse side, is, oh, I'm sorry, I love you. I love you. And make them feel like they deserve it, like it's their fault. And I think that's a huge problem And now, looking at it from a cyber context and like bringing it back, like we have the emotional side of things. Well, now you're really trapped because now it's not only do you deserve because you talked to your friend on Facebook or you commented on somebody's post or you shared something that they didn't agree with. So now there's all these other factors that they're just being, really handcuffed. And even though it's not physical handcuffs, it's just that the mental, the emotional, the physical, but it always comes back to, I love you. I'm looking out for you. This is what's best for you. You deserve this.
Yeah,
Right.
And Keenan just hit it on the head there. Emotional
Mm-hmm.
abuse is just, if not more, damaging to a person, its psyche, and the person for years on end. So
Oh, yeah.
it's very important, and that goes to the next question, which is, because of this manipulation, because this might have happened for quite a bit, quite long time before the person gets to that point where they say enough is enough. There's usually a rebound effect that always happens when you're trying to help somebody. They try to get away, but they come back. How do you counsel people when they start doing that bouncing back and forth? I'm better off with them type situation.
Average is 7 times. On average, a person makes 7 attempts to leave an abusive situation. Sometimes, yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's a matter of the individual comes back because of financial matters. They feel like they're having trouble escape or surviving on their own after that. And that's coupled in with the emotional aspects of the
Mm-hmm.
abuse, where they've heard for sometimes years and years and years, you can't survive without me. If you leave, I'm going to find you. And all of these other things that kind of start to become the person's internal monologue. So it's really important to celebrate the successes when we're talking to an individual. Now, number one thing that we do that we learned early on is we partner as quickly as we can with with other allies. So making sure that the person, as much as possible, gets into. We advocate for therapy. We advocate for working with social workers who can actually work on that aspect much more intensively. But for our side, we really do focus on celebrating those wins and saying, "Oh, you secured your accounts. This now you have some privacy on your network," and so on. And one thing that I saw had popped up with Keenan is she had pointed out also that children are a factor when there's custody issues, which we see quite a lot of. It can definitely make it much more challenging for the individual, because then they have to try to make that trade. They have to try to make the custody arrangements, stick with the legal frameworks, which is often manipulated by the abuser in order to cause further emotional turmoil for the survivor.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's so difficult because it's frustrating to see children get brought into the mix, but there's a lot of abusers out there, men or women, it doesn't matter. And that's one thing that I think we need to make clear, is that it goes both ways. There are abusers on both sides, unfortunately, and so these custody battles come into play where that's used against that person, where the children are always used as weapons, especially in an abuse case.
Correct.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a very true thing. But statistically, 1 in 4 women will be victimized by an intimate partner in their lifetime. But also, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is 1 in 7 men will be the same. Yeah. A lot of our clients are men, and it's something that isn't talked about enough, because in many cases they come and they say, I'm sorry to take your time, or let me explain, or something like that, without realizing that they have as much right to get help and to feel safe as anyone.
So we've got a question right here.
Yeah, and I'm glad she asked that. It's a really good question. So one thing that bounce out is that we do have, of course, many women, and we have many non-binary people as well that are on the team. So we try to make sure that everybody's represented and everyone has someone that they're comfortable talking with, leaving that up to the discretion of the individual. So if a person says, well, I'm not comfortable talking to a man, that's absolutely fine. And we can certainly shift the framework of the team. Or if there's any sort of accommodation that they would like, then of course we can shift that as well. But one thing that I found is that actually isn't as common as I thought it would be when we started doing this. I had anticipated quite a bit more that there would be some resistance to working, particularly for abused women that come through our organization, that there'd be a lot more resistance to working with men. And one thing that I found is, in most cases, they're just so grateful to have someone that listens to them and so grateful to have someone that will help that rarely does come up. And I think one thing that helps is that we are a trauma-informed organization. We receive trauma-informed training through some partnerships. We do receive, and we're rolling this out more throughout the organization, we do receive the same training that shelter and safe house directors receive through the Department of Justice. So it helps us to kind of have those conversations early on and really kind of focus on it, that we are here to help them.
Okay, wonderful. So,
yeah, just to echo, just to amplify what Keenan had said, it's true, is that when someone has been through these circumstances and been through these situations and is dealing with the trauma and is dealing with those after effects, the importance of finding that safe space and just finding that safety and finding that privacy really does overshadow everything else.
Yeah, and one of the things that she brought up is it's about power, right? That's what a lot of abusers are craving, is that power. And I made a comment on YouTube that is very much that, unfortunately, a lot of your abusers were also abused, so they're taking that power that they lost because of somebody and moving it forward, and like we say, pass it forward. Like, if you do something good or someone does something nice for you, do something nice for someone else. Well, this is that same context of, you have been dealt a horrendous hand, but instead of somebody helping you get the help that you need, you are now taking that hand you were dealt and passing it on to somebody else to try to regain that power. And it's a vicious cycle. So we have to find a way, and I hate to say this, but especially for men, to find the help they need. Women are, look, I'm not going to deny, women are more often abused than men. That doesn't mean men aren't abused. It means women are more often. However, because of that, you have to look back at the childhood where it's the boys that get abused and then want that power back they lost in their life, that pass it on to women.
So let me.
You are correct, Keenan.
Yeah.
Yes, not all abusers have been abused, and you're right. It is very true. There is some type of mental or something, psychological disorder or what have you, that causes these problems.
So, Chris, let me ask you this question. Do you find areas of the country that you guys operate on that are more prevalent to, or that you get more cases? I'll say it this way because this is a endemic issue. But do you find some areas that are more, I guess, have a greater incidence of this?
Surprisingly, not really. Not to any sort of statistical significance. It really is something that crosses all demographics. It's something that we see relatively equally across the board in affluent neighborhoods to more rural areas, large cities, small towns. It's definitely something that that does cross all those demographics. Well, you do see a lot of difference in the methods of abuse. When you tend to see abuse that comes from more affluent areas, like, for example, in certain larger cities or the Silicon Valley, things like that, the abuse tends to focus more on technology, or it tends to incorporate technology a lot more, such as taking away phones, using stalkerware, which is a horrible concept anyways, and things like that. Whereas, of course, in the areas that are less technology driven, we often see much more kinetic, much more physical forms of abuse.
Yeah. So we had a question earlier, how do the victims find you?
So we work really hard to be as easy to find as possible. So we have a couple different methods. So one is that we try to be as active as possible on social media to send out those messages, let people know that we're there, let people know, here's some tips, here's some things that you need, that you can know. A lot of it comes from word of mouth. So a lot of times, and this has kind of always been a part of our culture, or a part of our foundation, is that once we're able to help somebody and once we're able to help a family or a person or whatever it may be, they talk. They talk to others that have been in those circumstances. When they're in support groups, they talk to other individuals and they say, I was in this circumstance, they can help you too. So word of mouth is a big part of it. And really kind of the third portion is referrals. So we work closely with shelters, safe houses as much as possible, public safety, whoever it may be. And so, for example, a social worker, when they come in and they're encountering something that just doesn't quite make sense or doesn't quite sound right, then they know that they can reach out to us and we'll help.
So let's move now from that piece to how people can help, how people can join your organization. What are things that you are looking for? What is the process for anybody helping on this side?
So one thing that I personally love about this organization is it kind of has become more of a family for me and those that are in it. And everybody has a role that they can play. So, and if anyone comes in with any particular skill set, there's always something that they can do. Unfortunately, we want to put ourselves out of business more than anything. We want for the world to not need us. But because of the prevalence of different forms of abuse, there's always work that needs to be done. In fact, I hate to bring up the startling statistic, but by the time we finish this conversation of an hour, there's going to be 1,200 people statistically that will have been abused in that time frame by an intimate partner, 20 people every minute. So there's always people that need help. And so we always need people that can help. So there's really two main areas that we need some help with, and it's always kind of consistent. It's number one, we need the behind the scenes. We need the talent. We need the people that can help us to create what we need, the tools that we need to help other people. So people that help with content, people that can sit down there and say, I have time to write an article. I have time to write some tweets. I have time to write a quick security guide about how to secure the new version of iPhone. People that can, a lot of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis in our jobs, those are things that can apply here directly to an audience. Yes, our jobs pay us to do it, but we can also give of that time to help people that can't afford to pay us. Shelters and Safe, and just, I forgot to mention this earlier, we don't charge anyone anything for what we do. When someone comes and said, you helped us, how much do I owe you to help that you did the service for us? We don't take any money because we feel they need it somewhere else. And often because they need to rebuild their lives and they need that money elsewhere. Yeah. So being able to say, this is something you can have for free, it makes a huge difference. So when we're able to create those things, people that can help us with content, graphics is a constant thing that we need some help with. Graphic designers, web, things like that. Really throwing that out there, trying to get some help in there. And trainers as well, people that can help make videos, people that can help to explain things in a way that makes sense, like really just something that we can use to say, hey, shelter, safe houses, here's some tools that you need. That's kind of the first group. And the second real big thing that we need is we need the helpers. We need the people that can, work directly with the clients and can say, I'm going to help you stay safe. We need people that can help us with the OSINT piece, the forensics piece, the people that can go to the shelters and safe houses and say, hey, here's your vulnerabilities. We need to improve this. We need to put lights here, cameras here. Those are all things that we do on a regular basis. And those are all things that can literally save a life.
Okay, so I just wanted to bring up the website for everybody that's out there. And one of the big things here, it's SafeEscape.org. And there's a donate button right here. So all our viewers from New Battlefield and Raíces, make sure you go out there and donate to this organization because like Chris said, they don't charge anybody anything. This is all volunteer and they need the donations very, very badly so that they can continue to do this mission. As well as I wanted to reach out or let you guys know that there are all the contact information is down here, as well as they have a form directly on the website that you can contact them. So anything else you want to say about the website and what information is very valuable here?
Yeah, one thing I'd really like to reiterate is that we are looking for web designers.
I got a buddy that asked if you're looking for data analysts. So if you're looking for data analysts, I'm sure he's willing to volunteer as well.
Actually, surprisingly, yes. And I'll cover on that for a second. Because one thing that we always try to do is we try to be, I froze. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just be frozen for a little while. But we always try to do whatever we can to help in many different ways. And so we recently had some grad students that donated their time I'm not sure why I'm frozen there. I'm not sure if it's on my end or what. But
Okay.
they donated their
I
time.
can hear you. You're good.
We can hear you,
There-
so
there we
continue
go.
on.
They donated their time, and they helped us to rank each state by different factors and how they support survivors of domestic violence.
We got
So
the perfect
everything
person
from-
for you.
It would. Yeah. So we're still trying to analyze and work with that data. So absolutely, any skill set, we can make use of it.
Okay,
That
perfect.
we definitely got a guy for you that knows
Yeah.
numbers better than probably anybody else I know.
All right. So now, one of the things that we like to ask all our guests is, how can we help? How can our community help here to be able to support the organization?
So one of the things we really need is we need people that can roll up their sleeves and help us to do this better and to keep doing this. Like I said, any skill set is something that makes a difference. And I'll caveat just to say, and just so it's in case it's a consideration for anybody, is that we do. Is that still working? We are very careful about who we bring into the organization, because we do work with vulnerable individuals.
Yeah.
So we do take the time to do our background checks and do some OSINT checks and everything else. And I'm sure that everybody listening would be very disappointed if we did not do that.
Exactly.
So of course, that is something that sometimes can take a brief period of time to get in. But so really, that we need the help, we need the people, we need people with the technical and the security skill sets. But in addition, just whether or not it's through this organization is just a matter of advocating in your own communities. Really kind of highlighting the ways that technology can be misused to abuse a person. And as you go back to your own organizations and start developing tools, developing software, developing programs and websites, to consider how this huge portion of the population that does affect your audience, not only your audience, but the customer base for the people that are watching, may not be in the same situation that we would like to assume that they are.
Yeah. And so going back to how the folks join you and, reach out to you for these services. Is there any kind of checking to see about the validity of the accusations? How do you get through that point where somebody says, and I'm getting to a very nebulous point where people say, I'm being abused, but they are the abuser.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that.
Well, no, that is something that can happen. That is something that we're on guard for, because we don't want to be weaponized. We made that decision early on to make a conscious effort that should someone who is actually the abuser try to contact us and use us in order to further harass or somehow harm their actual victim of crimes, that's not the role that we're in. And so to protect against that is that we don't take offensive action. So we're not hacking the abusers. We're not stalking them. We're not calling them. We're not doing things for them. We're focused on defense. And so in a sense, we're kind of the blue team in that regard. So we're helping the individuals that contact us to stay safe, to disappear if they need to disappear, in order to take those measures so that they can defend themselves. So, and in addition, there are some, which I unfortunately can't disclose on here. We call it TLP Red. It's our version of classified. Yeah. But there are kind of some earmarks that we've developed that we've worked with psychologists, social workers, and the like, that kind of indicate that there may be something that's not quite on the up and up. So we really try to be aware so that we can be as helpful as possible.
Okay, so tell me, for anybody that may be listening to us, or actually, Chris, if you want to rejoin us so that the camera can come back, we can talk about a little more.
Sure, I am trying.
Or just go ahead and leave and come back. Okay.
Oh, leave the studio?
Yeah, leave the studio.
Yeah, you can leave and come back. It's okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll be right back.
We're not going anywhere.
Yep. No, but I do think it's a very important topic, and I think everything that we're discussing is very important. So before Chris comes back, as I know he's going to be here, as far as like cyber and protecting people online, I think that is something that is very underrepresented in any area, and not a lot of people are trying to protect the individual, right? We all concentrate, at least in the U.S. I don't know of other countries, but in the U.S. we concentrate on companies, right? Let's protect a company, and this company, and that company, and this company. But when it comes to the individual, it is something we are severely lacking in protecting each of these individuals and showing them how to protect themselves.
And one thing is, for anybody that's watching us right now and is in the field of cybersecurity and is here doing that, cybersecurity, infosec, any of these areas, we build a specific set of skills, and we do this trade all day long. And this organization and organizations like this allow us to use the skills that we learn for the good of the people. We learn and we make a difference. And that is what is incredibly important about the hey, there we go, Chris. So being an information security person, learning these skills, putting these skills to work. So if you are looking at doing something and doing something good for the community, go to SafeEscape, reach out to Chris and join them, because they need the help. And you've got some skills out there. Okay?
So as Chris is back, I got a question for him because Sarah actually posted it from Facebook, and we do see, like I said, a lot of this starts when we're younger, right? A lot of these problems come about when kids are younger. So how do we go about teaching kids to stay safe online? And now I've talked to high schools, and I've talked to younger kids that probably shouldn't be online, like on social media, but we know they are. So how can we take what we do, right, whether it be from the standpoint of adults or the standpoint of cybersecurity, and teach kids how to really protect themselves as they're doing things online?
Yeah, so that's a really important question. I apologize for the sound quality. I switched over to my phone. No idea what's going on my side. Says the IT guy. How about that? Um, but you're right. That's where the conversations have to start, is early on. And I think that in a lot of ways we do that well in terms of talking about physical assault, sexual assault. We tell children what you have a right to. You have a right to autonomy of your body and to being physically safe. But I think that we're not talking about the widest scope of some of the other forms of abuse that they need to be on the lookout for. We're not talking to children about how abuse starts and how isolation starts. We're not talking about how when you're dating and they say, stop seeing your friends, that's a red flag. Those aren't the conversations that we're having. So really, it starts at home. Those are the conversations we need to be having when we have the other conversations with our children. But also when we have those same classes that are starting to filter into the schools, it needs to be in broader scope to be able to cover the way that abuse tends to start. And that's particularly true in this world. We have kids that are growing up on social media. Yeah. We have kids that are accustomed to sharing everything they have. We have the rise in cyberbullying, which has a much broader effect than when we grew up, when there was no such thing really as cyberbullying. There's no such thing as cyber. So it's a very different world. And I think a lot of the times the people that are having these conversations or are taking the opportunity to have these conversations aren't accounting for the fact that it's a different landscape than we grew up in. Cool. So certainly talking about the basics of online safety, but also extending the conversation of abuse into the digital world.
Correct.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is happening more and more in the space and younger, because I've seen kids in middle school, high school, you've got to be by the phone. I got to be able to reach you at any point in time. And it starts there, and it just progressively gets worse and worse and worse for these kids. And I'm seeing it as early as middle school.
Right.
So
I've seen it. I've seen it even earlier, and that's the sad part, is we're seeing it earlier and earlier. And look, you're right, Chris. We come from a time where phones and cyber and all this stuff didn't exist. But I've gotten to a point now, I've talked to enough kids, I've talked to enough students that I'm sorry, as parents, you privacy goes out the window anymore. Privacy, look, it has to, because when you look at what you think your kids are doing, and you're like, oh, I got great kids and this, that, and the third, but at the end of the day, you take a look and you're like, what the hell do you think you're doing? Like, what is going through your head when you're saying this or doing this? And you have to have those conversations.
And I think in that regard is that transparency becomes the key, because it's like we forgot all of the lessons that we learned growing up in DARE, which of course we know didn't work. Statistically, DARE did not work, because the approach was, if you do drugs, you're going to die. If you do drugs, and this bad thing's going to happen to you. And then once kids start saying, well, okay, I did it and I'm fine, or he did it and he's fine, so it's probably okay. And how that's related here is that I think the conversation that we keep having, perhaps because it's an easier conversation to have, is if you talk online, these bad things are going to happen. Yeah. Or if you share photos of yourself, if you share intimate, private photos of yourself, these things, bad things are going to happen. And the thing is, we're not putting it in the right context. Because if someone does share, if a child, as is often the case, shares an intimate picture and nothing bad happens immediately, then just like we learned with DARE, they say, oh, none of this is true. I was misled by my parents. But when we talk about, okay, here's where this leads. Here's where this goes. Here's how revenge, non-consensual pornography works. Here's how blackmail works and all these other things. And it doesn't always start immediately. We need to be having the right conversation. And to your point, is that if it does, when you do have those conversations with children, you do say, I need to see what you're doing online. I need to see what conversations you're having. Explaining why and explaining what you're looking for and how this is a thing helps to not, it doesn't teach them, otherwise you teach them how to be sneakier versus teaching them that they can trust you and that you're looking out for them. So I think you're right in what you're saying, and that's definitely something that needs to be recharacterized.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I still can't see fried egg without thinking of drugs.
Look, there was a crazy thing, and you're right. You look at it and it's like, oh, well, drugs or whatever.
Drugs are bad.
But drugs are bad, okay? So when I talked to the high school kids most recently, I did tell them, I was like, look, it is one thing you're dating somebody, you have a boyfriend or whatever, and they were freshmen, so you're looking at like 14-year-olds. And I was like, I get that. That makes sense. But let's say you send them a picture. What's gonna say they're not gonna send it to somebody else?
Correct.
Right.
And what's going to say it's not going to end up online? And I'm going to tell you right now, anything online is permanent. I can go to the Wayback Machine or a ton of other ways and find anything that's actually been deleted. Mm-hmm. You can say you deleted it, but if it's online, it's permanent.
And that's part of the education. That's part of the cyber education. That's part of the education that I say it all the time. Everybody knows how to use their phone, but they don't know about the technology that's in their phone. They know how to use a computer, but they don't know how to use a computer.
Well, and the funniest part about it is the biggest question I got asked, well, what about incognito mode or VPNs? And I said, well, let's take it back. Incognito mode doesn't work if I'm sniffing the internet. And VPNs don't work if I'm sitting on your computer or on the distant end. So let's really be honest about this. Those methods are only for those that don't know how to look and don't know what they're looking for.
So we've got a friend, Caitlin Bowden, who went through this issue of revenge porn and the need for legislation. So check out the National Blast podcast with Keenan, and this is a very, very good one to look at so that you can see this type of information.
Absolutely.
Go into that, Chris. So, we've talked about the physical or proximity, domestic violence, if you will. And we've talked about some of the bullying, but there's another area, which is the harassment and online piece, which can get. Do you guys get into that piece, or how? What is the flow there?
So we do, and oftentimes we get someone where that's the entirety of their situation, but very often that's the continuation of the abuse. For example, when someone leaves their abusive partner and they get a restraining order that says don't contact this person, You might not be shocked to know that sometimes people that are abusive don't really respect restraining orders and legal agreements. Yeah, shocking, I know. But because technology is so much more accessible now, it kind of cuts both ways. So where you may have someone that creates dozens and dozens or hundreds or more of fake email accounts and VoIP accounts and things like that in order to further harass the person. So that is something that we do work with. And surprisingly, when we first started dealing with that, I wasn't sure about the different approaches. But as people smarter than me began helping, our rate of success in dealing with those has gone up quite a bit, and has resulted in the past in actual what's what I'm looking for, where someone gets in trouble. Legal repercussions. I'll just say that.
Yeah. So
prosecution is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So just as an example, what are one of the ways when you're dealing with that? Because I don't know if you've seen it, but on Twitter especially, we see a lot of people that get harassed, and on Twitter and YouTube, by these SOC accounts, right? By people just creating more and more and more and more and more accounts. What are some of the ways and some of the advice you would give to these people about how they can combat that with how often and how frequently it happens? And I see it more often from women than I do from men, of course. I mean, that just tends to be the norm. But, what is one of the ways they can combat? Because half of them don't have the time of day to track down who owns these accounts.
Yeah. So one thing, it depends largely on the intent of the motive of the adversary, right? The motive of the bad guy doing it. If it's something where they've just picked a person to harass, or there's something that they said online they didn't like, or there's for some reason they've decided, okay, I'm going to troll, I'm going to harm, I'm going to harass this person for a while. Yeah. Sometimes it's as simple as not engaging. We used to say don't feed the trolls, and I'm not oversimplifying the circumstance by saying that, but sometimes if you block and don't engage, they get bored, they move on to someone else. That's the best case scenario. That's always the easiest case scenario. Oftentimes it's a matter of continuing to report. Sometimes, and I see this a lot, and it always kind of warms my heart when I do, when someone is going through that and they say, hey, community, please help me. And people will mass report, and people will mass, report the accounts. And so they tend to get shut down pretty quickly. Why that works is because Twitter, Facebook, things like that, although there's a lot of ways around it that we all know, you generally need some form of validation to create an account. You need a phone number or something like that. And more, the online VoIP numbers aren't working. So it kind of almost becomes a barrier for a lot of individuals that are doing it, in that they can only afford so many phones, or they can only afford so many phone numbers, or whatever it is, or whatever tools they may have. Sometimes has limitations. So eventually they run out of the ability to harass the person there, which makes it kind of hard for some of us that are creating legitimate research accounts or sock puppets. But again, there's ways around it. So yeah.
So you went from, so the online trolling, bullying piece. Now, as you know, there's various areas or various limits of different online activity. Like I said, from the trolling to the stalking to the harassing to the, so once it gets to that stalking, which is more of a malicious intent area, and we're having a lot of news lately about the AirPods and not the AirPods, the AirTags, about how they're being used for stalking concerns. What can you tell us about that?
About about which piece, the AirTags and specifically?
Let's first start when a person goes from that trolling, harassing to the stalking piece.
Okay. So the best case scenario comes in when you can prove that pattern of behavior, and I'll be very careful how I say this piece, tying it to a specific origin. And then at that point, we will, whenever possible, work with law enforcement to pursue that further. And I'm being intentionally vague because, of course, we have our TTPs that we try to keep.
Yeah.
Right. But of course, this is a very smart audience that probably knows what I'm getting at. So there are some ways to kind of, for lack of a better term, unmask an individual that is surprisingly effective, particularly when that person wants to get a rise out of their victim. There's ways to kind of play into that in order to get them to trip up and reveal inadvertently who they actually are. And in that case, when someone's getting it from all angles, they're getting harassed, they're getting stalked. Everything they say has comments on it. They're getting they're getting reported. Anything in order to upset the person, in order to harass the person. Just knowing that someone's there that's going to help, someone that can do that will do what they can. It's a huge relief for that person to know that there's someone looking out for them.
Okay. And the last big question that I have, and I guess the next level up, is how often do you see the abuse turning into homicide or a very serious physical threat? Oops.
He just joined again from somewhere else.
Oh, look at that. Now we've got 2 Chris's.
We got 2.
My IT creds here. So,
all right. So the question was, how often do you see the abuse, the harassment, the trolling, to getting to that point of very bad physical abuse or even homicide?
So I'm going to say I'll answer that in reverse order. I'm very thrilled to say that we've participated in over 3,000 successful escapes, and none have resulted in homicide. We've actually have a 100% success rate in that regard. So we're very, very happy for that, because of course our whole goal is to make sure that each person gets out safe. But tying in with what we had said before, is you're right when you said that it's about power. It's about the abuser wants the power.
Yeah.
And when a person starts to take that back and have their own autonomy, that means the abuser is losing that power. And so they'll do whatever they can do in order to take it back. And that's when it becomes very dangerous for the individual, and sometimes even the helpers. That's why law enforcement, it's one of the most dangerous calls law enforcement can go on to. In fact, I hate to say that's conservatively speaking, 85% of domestic homicides occur after the person made a commitment to leave. Yeah. So it does tend to escalate, and often in cases where the person is hopeful that the abuse is going to stop at harassment, that it's just going to be harassment, it's just going to be other forms of abuse, it often does escalate past that point. So that's why escape becomes so important while it's still safe to do so.
Yep, that's right. So, okay, so I'm going to open up the chat here for a quick question. Go ahead and ask your question in the chat here. We've got about 5 minutes for that. So please ask any questions to Chris, and it's open there. While we're waiting for the questions here, Chris, I want to thank you very, very much for this. One of the other things that I was going to ask you is, how are you reaching, because of our raíces, Hispanic, all this stuff, how are we reaching the Latino, Hispanic community, and what kind of needs do you have on that?
So one thing that we've kind of taken on is that we have a lot of material. We have a website, we have a lot of written material, and just based on the capabilities that we've had, it's all in English. And so we have identified the need. We really do want to get some translations in there. We want to make some organic translations. I'm going to talk to you later about this very thing, because we do want to make sure that things are far more accessible. Yeah. And the other aspect is that we really strive for diversity in our team for many, many reasons, but we want to make sure that everyone's voices are heard. So we really do want to reach out to all the different communities in order to make sure that we're hearing everything that we need to be hearing. So definitely more representation, the volunteers from the Latino community, hearing those concerns, it really does help.
Well, as you see Leonardo, he's right there. We are going to, Raíces is, should we say it? Let's go ahead and say it. Raíces and SafeEscape are partner organizations, and we have a strategic partnership. So we are going to be supporting SafeEscape in all the outreach for Hispanics, and we have a lot of the good things coming between our two organizations. So stay tuned. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think I probably should have mentioned that.
Yeah, you probably did.
It's all good, but now that we got that out of the way, there is a very, very important question here. Because of what we deal with as cybersecurity and in the cybersecurity community, Keenan asks, what about when the abuser is in infosec/cybersecurity? Like, how do you beat someone that knows the system?
So that's a great question. That's a really important question. That's something we deal with all the time. And so one thing we do, we have an incredible intake team. We have an amazing intake team that when the person first contacts us, we start doing those triage, we start asking those questions. And I remember there's one case that I was directly working this for some time back, and start to have the conversation. We do what's called the lethality assessment. We ask these questions, but we don't sit them down with a checklist. We want to make it as comfortable as possible for the person. And I remember I was talking to this one particular individual who has allowed me to share this story with people because it's a great illustrative example. And I say, okay, so how well do you think this person knows computers? And she says, oh, he's a hacker. He's a great hacker. I know that he can hack anything. And at this point, I'm sympathetic, I'm listening, but they hear that a lot. They're told that a lot. They're manipulated into believing that's true. And I say, okay, where would he have learned that? And she says, oh, well, he was in the Army. And at that point inside, I'm saying, oh, good, because I was in the Army and we're not always that smart. I say, oh, I was in the Army. I was stationed here. Where's he stationed? It's true.
Don't do that to me. Oh, it hurts.
We're not Navy. We're not Navy.
At least Air Force. Give me Air Force. Come on.
But in all honesty, why I say that is because sometimes people say, oh, they were in the military. Everyone in the military knows how to hack. Like, that's kind of this misconception that comes up. And so I say, well, where was they stationed? And she says, oh, he was at a place called Fort Meade. And that changes the conversation.
Oh, yeah, that changes the conversation very much.
Yeah. So we really try to kind of gauge the actual capabilities of the abuser when we start off this conversation. So when it is, for lack of a better term, one of us, one in the InfoSec community, who is very much not one of us, but one that is in the community, we really do kind of have to tailor our approach to that. But one thing I think that our guiding principle is that these are people that rarely have allies. They will have allies. They'll have a small number of allies they can work with. Sometimes they'll band together. But no small group, no individual is as skilled as all of us working together. So we get all of the smart people working together with the right tools, working on defense. That's how you win. So really, it's focusing on those capabilities and really kind of stepping up the defense.
And we always say, InfoSec, security, cybersecurity, everything that we do is a team sport. So
it is.
And
frankly,
requires more.
This community, and we've seen this with some examples that I won't name here, but I think we all know who I'm talking about, where the InfoSec community despises abuse in its ranks. So when someone is that abuser, then that word sometimes gets out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that is one of the things I think we're very, very prominent about is at least the people that we've seen. And I know me and Eric are very, very confident in who we follow, is that we can shut that stuff down and figure out who is in the wrong. And that's one of the things that I think some people lack the capability of just seeing wrong is wrong is wrong. I don't know why, but they just don't see it. So thankfully with Eric, and I'm sure yourself, Chris, wrong is wrong no matter what. There's no leeway in that. When you're abusing someone, whether it's a troll or it's something else, you can see wrong is wrong.
Yeah. And frankly, we were at one time when I first started going to cons and Black Hat, we were bad at that. As a community, we were not taking it seriously. We were not listening to women who were saying that they were being abused at cons. And so we weren't listening. And I think that we've definitely improved, I'll say.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've improved, but I mean, as always, there's always a ways to go. And I think one of the things is, though, we have to take it from a consideration of we are still growing. We are still learning. We are still trying to understand. Things don't happen overnight. We're trying to get better. And I think people don't realize that as a community, we are trying to get better. There are those that aren't, but the ones that are calling out those others.
Yeah. And that's why those of us, those voices, we need to, like you, and I appreciate you raising these issues because we need to keep saying it. In the community, we need to keep saying abuse is abuse and abuse is wrong. Control is wrong. Stalkerware is not something that a concerned spouse installs on their phone, on their spouse's phone. That's not what it is.
So I should remove that from my wife's?
Armin, let me get your phone again. No. No, so again, Chris, thank you very, very much for being here. I
Thank you for
think
having
that
me.
this is a very important topic. I think what, like I said, now that our organizations are partner organizations, strategic partners here, you have the full support of Raíces Cyber organization for the translation, the outreach. We have our own InfoSec community in Spanish here that
Mhm.
we will support you guys for anything that you need. You know how to get a hold of me, so let's do this. Do you
Thank
have
you.
any other words?
Just that I really appreciate not only you having me, I appreciate the community that's here that took time to listen to this message. And I appreciate those in the community that are working diligently. It's not always glamorous work. It's not always something that gets a lot of attention or likes or views or follows, but there's a lot of heroes out there inside the organization and even outside of it that are doing what they can every day to make the world better. And I just want to acknowledge and thank the heroes in Operation Safe Escape and those doing what they can everywhere. And Women's Society Cyber Jiu-Jitsu, which is an
Yep.
amazing organization as well.
Amazing
Yeah.
organization.
Very
Huge
much.
fan for their work.
Well, like you said, Chris, you brought it up, so I'm going to bring it up. So, why don't you guys please like the video here, subscribe to the channel, consider following us, and one call to action for this show, please go to www.safeescape.org and donate or volunteer. So again, thank you very, very much, Chris. I appreciate. We'll do some great things together. So again, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right. All right, Cyber Warriors. So we are going to wrap one more up here. Any final questions from you?
Yeah, so look, no questions, but I will say this. Look, donate to Safe Escape. They are a great cause, great organization. Please, please, please donate to them. Help them out. Donate to Raíces if you have not yet done so. Go ahead, like, subscribe, comment to this video, and tomorrow I will have Neil Bridges on Security Happy Hour, so make sure you check that out on Friday, the 28th.
And what is the Friday the 28th?
Oh, that is right. It's Cyber Papa's birthday tomorrow, so make sure you wish him a happy birthday tomorrow on the 28th.
All
And
right.
look, check us out. We're here every week. Eric, thank you for being booked through April as of right now. I am booked through February. We love you. We think you are all amazing and very important people. So please follow us, subscribe, like, comment, donate, everything you can do, please do. We love you. Take care and have a good weekend.
Take care, everybody. Hold on. I'll turn. All right. Good night, everybody.